Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com. In a moment, David Sereda joins us. We're going to be talking with David about a number of subjects, including reportedly a former Lockheed engineer who confirms the existence of UFOs and aliens. This is a very controversial story. David's got some information on this individual. Now, I do want to let you know that there are some internet sites that say, no, it's a hoax, it's not true. The photos that were involved are plastic collectible figurines. We're going to talk with David about all of this next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. David Sereda is a co-founder of Voice Entertainment, director, producer, filmmaker. He's also a well-known space scientist, physicist, ecologist, and spiritual explorer as well. Talk with David about a number of subjects tonight in the couple hours he's with us, including, of course, this very strange story of a former Lockheed engineer named Boyd Bushman about UFOs and aliens. David, first of all, welcome back to the program. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a bit of a surprise because Boyd passed away in August, and this story has gone viral on our
news. Oh, my
news.
God. It really is. I do want to get your reaction to this, though, as we were doing research into Boyd, and I know you knew a lot about him, and it's an incredible story. But there is a website that says, No. His photos that he showed people were really plastic collectible figurines produced by a toy company called Halloween FX, and then later confirmed by a newspaper in San Diego. What's your take on that?
Okay, this is where it gets really deep, because I knew Boyd personally for 10 years. He was a Lockheed Senior Scientist for 20 years and worked for Howard Hughes, Texas Instruments, McDonald Douglas, the Shah of Iran, and he developed Red-Eye, the first infrared heat-seeking missiles, I think, at General Dynamics in the early days of his career. And he became obsessed with UFO and anti-gravity cases, and he investigated every single one. One of his very good friends was a Navy doctor who had just treated a young pilot who had used the Tesla death ray to shoot down what they thought was an enemy aircraft over Roswell, New Mexico on July 7th or 8th, 1947, but it turned out to be an extraterrestrial craft. And that Navy doctor testimony today flies with me far more than fake videos on YouTube and a lot of stuff that can be fabricated, including dolls. But what ends up happening, I've known Boyd for many, many years. I was introduced to him by John Hutchison, because he was obsessed with Hutchison's work in anti-gravity.
Right. The
and
Hutchison
of course, Lockheed
effect
is the number one, bigger than Boeing, defense contractor in the United States. And I've been getting regular emails from Boyd for 10 years, and I've met him several times. He's impeccable, brilliant, unbelievable electrical engineer. And, Boyd called me once, and he said, this was July 2008, and he said there's a weakness in security in New Mexico at Los Alamos where the Roswell bodies are being stored. And before I go any further, remember that Colonel Philip Corso said when he saw the bodies, they were half living, half cybernetic. And they're basically AI. They're partially AI. They had fluid in their veins, but they're not like you would think a full-skinned ET would look like. They're part machine, and they're small. And so Boyd says to me that I can meet him on this lonely highway at this mile marker if I want to drive from Sedona, Arizona, and I will be able to touch and see these preserved bodies because there's no security at the storage facility. And it's crazy. I turned him down because I said, I don't want to drive all the way because I know how long those highways are. I've been to Roswell. And I said, I'm not going to drive all the way out there. I said, he ends up having his associate get one of those plastic cameras those little disposables, because it's the only thing they can sneak in. And they go in and get a bunch of pictures of the body and develop them on real film, which I have right here in front of me. And what ends up happening is he wants me to go public with this story. I do this amazing interview where he's telling me things he shouldn't be telling me, things that I can't even say on the air tonight because there's security issues. Boyd is high clearance, high-level security military scientist who developed weapons that are so advanced nobody even knows about them today. You can Google his name at the U.S. Patent Office on simple search, and you'll see tons of Lockheed patents come up with his name on it. So this is testimony. And Boyd hands me these photographs. I go to Texas, and I said, these don't look that real to me. And I'm like, wait a minute, these things look like they've been taken apart. This face on this alien has so much fine detail. He has so much personality. And I said, no one's going to believe this, Boyd, because you can fake anything. And Boyd swore the story was true. Now, in the past couple of weeks, when somebody else interviewed Boyd when he was not very coherent, nowhere near as coherent as my unpublished interview that I have not released, these photos Boyd's showing, which are not very clear online, but I've given your website one of the clearest ones he's given me, although I have one much sharper.
Yeah, I think we've got the comparison one.
You see the comparisons?
Yeah.
What ends up happening is this doll shows up, and the doll is so... I FedExed them to Dan Aykroyd, and I said, Dan, have you seen this alien in any movie? Because I don't want to go public with this story.
Right.
With my name on it, if this is some joke or they're trying to ruin me, I don't know what they're doing. And so Dan sends me back this funny picture. I think it's his daughter holding an alien doll, and that's picture number 2 on your site. Now, if you look at picture number 2 on your site, I mean, this thing looks stiff. It doesn't have the pentagram star in the eyebrow area between the eyes. It doesn't have the mouth detail. It doesn't have the circles around the eye are just too simple on the doll. If you look at the real one on the left, there's so many fine details in the circles on the eyes. And then when you get to the Kmart doll, photo number 3, it's just the ink is smeared and it's just pouring down the face. So you look at this and you go, what's going on here? Is it possible that firstly, I mean, look at like one of the biggest selling E.T. dolls in history was Spielberg's doll, E.T. He's a nice-looking alien, clean circles around the eyes. He doesn't look messy like this guy does. If you had a body that you were trying to preserve since 1947 in formaldehyde and other chemicals in the early days, and then what was known as it's a form of plasticizing bodies and skin that was developed in the 70s, but was probably developed much earlier than that, could absolutely preserve a body, but it would make it look plastic-like. And they do this today. You can preserve anybody's body with these plastic chemicals. And I believe that's probably what happened and would have happened to the Roswell body, but there would be huge dark circles around the eyes because of the loss of, I don't want to call it blood, because course...
Well, fluids.
Whatever. So he wouldn't really look like this. So you see these huge dark circles around his eyes, and the face and the neck is very dark, which is where you have normally protruding veins. And why would anybody make a doll that they're going to sell to kids look this ugly? Because it looks like it's dead. It's not attractive like the E.T. doll. It's not attractive like any other alien doll that anybody sells. I've searched Walmart. I've searched every site there is in America, and I did this in 2008 before I was thinking of going public with the story way back then.
It's not cute, David. A kid wouldn't want to buy it in the store, let's say.
A kid wouldn't want to buy it. And then you see the 2 arms look like they've been put back on. Now, I'm looking at a really sharp original, which I just haven't scanned and put online. The one you have is slightly out of focus, apparently because they were rushing with the camera because they only had so much time in there. This is their testimony. This isn't me talking. This is what Boyd told me. And the arms were removed probably to do an autopsy into the chest and the major arteries and the heart region to see what made this thing tick. it has all the signs of a partial AI, partial living being. When you look at his eyes, the one on the left, there's real presence there. You look at the other two, and they look like cheap knockoffs. Well, that's Boyd's testimony. But, I can't say I don't believe it, and I can't say I believe it. But when I look at all the data, Boyd would always tell me, follow the data, theory be damned. Don't be that impressed with math. It's pretty accurate, but it's not perfect. And Boyd followed all of my physics and all of my work. He was a big fan of my Great Pyramid frequencies, which we talked about last time.
Well, and what did you think of him personally, David?
He's just so brilliant and so impeccable. I worked for a Nobel Prize-winning scientist in nuclear fusion, and my boss, Maglich, who invented helium-3 fusion, was nearly funded by Howard Hughes. Hughes was ready to sign the check in his last days, and Boyd worked for Howard Hughes. And when I asked Boyd about Howard Hughes, he got really upset. Now, this gets really...
Hold on for a second, David. We'll come back and talk more about this. It's almost like the Philip Corso story where you have these deathbed confessions. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Coast, back with David Sereda. We're talking about Boyd Bushman, who passed away, but before he did, he talked about an alien life form, human contact, and he's a former Lockheed Martin engineer. Snopes, of course, the Urban Legend Index says false claim, David. So, Boyd is getting hit on all sides here.
When they're looking at these things, when I put all three photos side by side up on your site, and you can clearly see the lack of detail in the middle and the right one, and the one I have in my hands is so... See, what you look for is broken symmetries. On a real face, your left and your right hemispheres, you're going to see nuances that are different. And if you look at the one in the middle, the left-right symmetry is too balanced, and the one on the right is just a mess. The ink is pouring down the face. But clearly, whoever made the dolls on the right and the middle had access to, theoretically, whatever Boyd Bushman's source had access to. And Boyd Bushman's source is military. I know him. I'm not allowed to name him, but he basically, Boyd trusts him more than anybody. More than anybody he's known, he trusts this source. And what I look for on the broken symmetries is, look at the mouth on the one on the left. You've got this black kind of goo coming out of the sides of the mouth. You've got so many uneven features from the left and the right. And somebody who makes, if you look at the E.T. doll that they sold since they made the movie, it's too clean. It's too perfect. So this thing on the left is, and he's got a lot of photos. I have a lot of photos here. I have close-ups of the veins in the head. Look at the one on the far right, how plastic and shell-like the skull is. And then you look at the one in the middle, and the skull is just so smooth and ordinary. And the one on the left has so many little dimples, so many little bumps. And that's why I tend to believe Boyd's story, because it matches Corso's data. And I believe the dolls were made as a decoy because they probably knew enough guys who had worked in this semi-secure facility, which is in Los Alamos. Boyd claims these were taken in Los Alamos during the passing of the turning of the guard when the security was low. They obviously knew enough people had taken photos and got them out, and people were either making the copy dolls as a decoy so that when and if any photos of the supposedly real Roswell 47 got out, no one would believe it. But just look at these three things. The one in the middle, Dan Aykroyd sent me this and thought, okay, it's over. You can't go with this. Look how straight the mouth is. It's perfectly straight. And look at the mouth on the left, this tiny little mouth, and all these little dimples that are so incredible. And the one on the right, just clearly just cheap plastic. So they all had access. Somebody had access, and somebody, let's say, theoretically did a smear job here.
Sure.
But let's go into Boyd's life, because this is where it gets really...
This is important. And let me ask you this, too. Did he gain financially from this story at all?
Oh, never.
All right.
No. I paid Boyd for his time when I interviewed him for my first film, From Here to Andromeda, and people just loved him in that. And then my second interview, I never released it because making movies is a lot of work, and I didn't release it because there was a lot of things he was telling me that really added up scientifically, and they were things that were too secure, things that I didn't. I'm patriotic, and I don't want this information getting out. And I'm not talking about aliens. I'm talking about actual technology and how things work.
Real stuff we've got. Okay.
And especially weapons, because Boyd goes on to invent and develop a beam weapon that's an advancement of Tesla's death ray. And he testifies that the death ray, which was in development just after Tesla's death, there's FBI documents that show is in development at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that's where the Roswell craft was taken after, according to Boyd's source, it was shot down with this early version of the Tesla death ray. But today's version of the death ray is far in advance of that.
Now, let's get into then this man, Boyd Bushman, and tell us exactly, who was he?
Well, see, he starts out working with Howard Hughes. And, Boyd's fascination with UFOs goes way back, of course, to Roswell. And let's go a little bit further back, because you'll see how this man, Boyd Bushman, merges himself with Howard Hughes' very similar quest to find the answer to Roswell. I mean, it's no coincidence that Howard Hughes, and I knew his close aides personally who were living in exile in Vancouver, British Columbia. John Meyer was one of his closest aides in The Last Day, and he was not allowed to cross the U.S. border. He wanted me to write his story. It's well known that he was hired by Howard Hughes to stop the atomic bomb testing. And I knew Glenn Seaborg, who was the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission authorizing all the nuclear tests, because he worked with Magwitch on nuclear fusion. And I saw him all the time, Seaborg, before he died. And he won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the explosive uranium isotope and plutoniums that led to the bomb. So I asked them all about UFOs. I asked them all about Roswell. And whenever I mentioned Howard Hughes' name to Seaborg, he got so mad. He was furious because he said Howard Hughes was so powerful, he almost stopped the nuclear weapons testing program. But Hughes wasn't there. He wasn't in Vegas in Nevada for the reasons people think. This is an aerospace man.
Yeah, we think he was there because he just got whacked out and he was afraid of people.
He was not whacked out. What Meyer told me, Meyer saw him all the time. Howard Hughes was busy with something, and nobody knew what it was. I believe he was making regular trips to Area 51. And that's why he was in Vegas. That's why he lived there. He became reclusive, but Meyer said there was nothing wrong with him. They even put an actor in there because Hughes was never there. And the actor was coming up with this story that he had gone crazy or something like that. He said there was nothing wrong with Howard Hughes. So Hughes was in Nevada because he wanted to get close to Area 51 in the ET crash retrieval projects. He wanted to know how the things fly, and that makes more sense than any motive for Howard Hughes to be there than anything I can think of. And
it does. It does make a lot of sense.
And Bushman worked for him in those days. So when I asked Bushman about Hughes, I got this same highly disturbed, like, you can't talk about him. Don't ask me about Howard Hughes. But he said, when I asked him about Howard Hughes in Area 51, he just said yes.
So he'd talk about aliens and crashed craft, but he wouldn't talk about Howard Hughes.
He wouldn't give me more details, but Seaborg already gave me the answer because John Meyer told me that Howard Hughes hired him to pay every presidential candidate $1 million if they would end the atomic testing. So already that made sense because when I asked Glenn Seaborg the same thing, Seaborg told me, he started shaking with his old English. Damn him, he said. he almost ended all of the nuclear testing. He was so powerful. And then I asked Seaborg about the UFO I saw in Berkeley in 1967, 68, and we were having lunch right there at the Lawrence, the Berkeley lab, sitting right up on the hill, which is now known as the Space Lab, because that's where Seaborg worked in his last days. And that's when he told me that there was nothing that he had access to with 37 levels above top secret that equaled anti-gravity. So he said it couldn't have been one of ours, what you saw. And he didn't laugh at me. He was very, very methodical. I told him, this is what I saw. It was hovering right here. You could see it from this lab. So here's what I think happened. This is going to go way back, and then we're going to come forward into Boyd Bushman. I think when we had tested the first atomic bomb at Trinity Site, New Mexico, July 22nd, I think it was, 15th to the 22nd, 1945, Seaborg knew, because he's the father of the bomb, him and the Manhattan Project scientists, and I knew three of them personally before they died. I worked with them. They put something in the core of the explosive that they knew would cause a gravitational wormhole to form. They were doing things far more advanced with nuclear detonation than just testing the bomb. I believe they ripped a hole in the fabric of space-time because from that moment forward, FBI files under J. Edgar Hoover, I have all of them, with blacked-out ink, show just UFOs being reported all over the United States and Canada. It's like they came through the hole, and they had only so much time before it closed. Kenneth Arnold sighting, June 1947. There were sightings at Edwards Air Force Base on July the 8th. There were about 7 or 8 craft that were reported there. Mm-hmm. Then what ends up happening in the end is there are reports of kids who built toy flying saucers. These are FBI files, really good reports. I have all of them. And these toy flying saucers flew anti-gravitic technology. And one of the cases, the kid's flying his saucer on Magnolia Boulevard in North Hollywood, and the fire department comes because the thing crashes in a woman's yard and catches on fire. They've got pictures of the thing. And he worked at Chevron, and he's test flying his saucer the day of the Roswell crash. I believe the ETs appeared in dreams to these kids, taught them how to make this technology because they knew in the future if we didn't have it, we were doomed. We were going to destroy the environment. We were going to destroy the rivers and the oceans and the streams. And whether you agree with global warming or not, fossil fuels are polluting our waterways and destroying fish populations and fresh air. So with that, I believe the hole was closing. And we had the Tesla death rate. Tesla, he died January the 8th, 1943, the night of the 7th going into the 8th. The death rate gets developed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Boyd Bushman's testimony from his friend, the Navy doctor, says this young pilot turned on the beam weapon. There was a bright flash. It fried the craft. Everyone got burns. The ETs were burned. Now, I have photos of this ET's feet and hands with exploded burn marks coming out of the knuckles and out of the toes. And they're close-ups that Boyd gave me, which matches that. Boyd said one survived. It lived at Los Alamos for a very long time, and then it tried to escape, and they shot it. And he told me when they shot it. I just don't remember. I have it all on tape. And so this is what I believe is happening. So there's these UFOs everywhere. The hole's closing. They've tried to transfer the knowledge on this anti-gravity technology to us, and they're racing towards the hole. We shoot 1 down and 2 and 3 down, but there was a total of 8 or 9 craft spotted at Edwards Air Force Base on July the 8th. The rest of them made it through the wormhole as it was closing, and the remaining ones, there's 3 crashes. There's one in Roswell, one at Trinity Site, and there's another one
at Corona, wasn't it?
At Corona. So what were they all doing there? They're all going back to the source. Now, we detonated the atomic bomb July. There were several detonations, but Trinity's like July 22nd, 1945. Roswell's July 7th in that week, 1947. Same location. same location, and the same week of the year. You see, imagine. I know for a fact from my conversations with Glenn Seaborg, Lawrence Litsky at MIT was a nuclear engineer at MIT. I knew him. I spoke in Congress with him on nuclear fusion. They knew that when you detonate nuclear bombs, that these micro wormholes open up for X amount of time.
Okay, assuming all that's correct, David, Bushman's story is still wild.
It's wild. I mean, here's this Lockheed scientist who's developed red-eye General Dynamics, the first infrared heat-sinking missiles. He's got dozens of patents. I've seen them all. He's given me every number of every patent I've
So
looked at.
he was who he says he was, right? He was credentialed. He was the real deal. Okay.
He's got higher credentials. He's not just a scientist at Lockheed. He's senior scientist, program manager level scientist. Now, I've known personally, a program manager at Los Alamos asked to meet me in person. We sat down. He was being transferred to NASA to be program manager there. And program managers manage whole divisions of scientific projects. And this particular program manager was so mystified by the NASA tether mission and my galaxy clock physics, he wanted to meet with me before he was being transferred to NASA. And I met another NASA scientist who was a program manager of a whole division who was attending UFO conferences and walking around with his notepad and taking notes. So Boyd is just another one of those guys, but Boyd's inventions and credentials are scientifically better. He's smarter than Seaborg. He's smarter than almost any. I mean, his patents are mind-blowing. He has many of them that weren't developed. He has.
Then why is he being attacked, David?
Well, he's being attacked because somebody did this smear job, made these dolls, because I told Boyd, I said the dolls are out, because John Hutchison put the photos on YouTube many years back. You know, because Boyd gave me the photos, he gave them to John Hutchison.
Right. And wasn't Boyd on a Discovery Channel program
he's
back
been on,
15
he's been
years
on
ago,
those
right?
Discovery Channel programs, good interviews when he was much younger. He had diabetes. You know, he wasn't really that old when he died. And Boyd his knowledge of physics and science and gravity and anti-gravity is the best of anybody I've ever met, including nuclear fusion. There's probably nobody smarter than him that I've ever met. So he really adds up. And here he is holding this picture that looks like a doll. But you got to remember the details in this supposed doll. It could have been plasticized, preserved. All the black and gray areas are reminiscent of a body that's lost its fluids and vital fluids, and it's completely dehydrated, which is what would happen to us if we died and we became a cadaver. I mean, look at Kennedy's eyes after the assassination. There's one photo of John F. Kennedy.
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, it's glazed over.
That big black circle around his eyes. You see, Why would you make a doll like that? You see, that's the part that doesn't make any sense. This doll, this alien, was not in any Hollywood movie I know of. It wasn't on the Sci-Fi Channel. So who made it and why and what kind of access did the artist have? And why does Bushman's supposed doll have so much better detail? And you should see I'll scan and send the other one that's completely in focus. I mean, the detail in this is just mind-blowing. Nobody spends that kind of time. Look at the five-pointed star in his eyebrow, and look at the other two. They don't have it. But they copied it clearly to smear this so that if this thing ever got out, no one would believe it. And the worst part is they're not going to believe the rest of Boyd's story, because Boyd's story then goes to Stephenville, because, Stephenville is right in the backwoods of Lockheed Martin territory. They have bases all over Texas. That's the home of Lockheed Martin. And everybody sees this massive, half a mile wide I mean, there are some witnesses that reported they couldn't see the end of the thing at the top of the tree.
So you're convinced, David, we're going to hit this break, come back at the top of the hour here. You're listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.
When you first left, couldn't make it through 1 hour without thinking of you. Hated giving you that power, but as time went on, I kept getting that much stronger. Now I can't go without a tear for half a day or longer. Guess some you win, and some you lose, and some just leave you lonely and confused. But now it only hurts at night when I'm lying alone in the darkness, wondering why you were so heartless.